The last thing my husband said before his entire family laughed at me was, without me, Laura wouldn't last 6 months, she'd be homeless. I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I didn't even look angry. I simply looked at his accountant, who happened to be sitting 3 chairs away from him, because 30 seconds earlier, that same accountant had quietly slipped a folded piece of paper into my hand. And written on it were 6 words, "Laura, don't sign anything tonight." That was when I realized my husband's joke wasn't really a joke, it was a warning. And apparently I was the only person at the table who didn't know why. My husband's name was Mark Bennett. We had been married for 26 years. We lived in Dublin, Ohio, in the same house where we'd raised our daughter, Emily. Mark owned a commercial cleaning company called Bennett Commercial Services. At least, that's what everyone thought. According to Mark, he had built it himself. 1 truck, 2 customers, nothing but hard work. His mother, Marilyn, repeated that story every chance she got. My son built that company from the ground up. She said it at Thanksgiving, she said it at Christmas, she said it at family barbecues, she even said it at Emily's college graduation. I never corrected her because the truth was more complicated. Mark had started the company, but I had built it with him. When we were newly married, Mark handled sales and crews. I handled everything else: invoices, payroll, insurance, contracts, taxes, client calls, employee problems, vendor payments. When Emily was born, I left my insurance job and worked for the company from our dining room table. For years, Mark used to say, "We built this together." Then, slowly, the word "we" disappeared. It became my company, and eventually I became the wife who helped out. I noticed, I just didn't fight it until that Sunday dinner. Marilyn had invited 12 people to her house. There was roast beef on the table, mashed potatoes, green beans, and enough wine to convince everyone they were funnier than they actually were. Mark was already on his 2nd bourbon when he lifted his glass. "You know what?" he said. Everyone looked at him. He pointed toward me. "If Laura ever leaves me, she'll be homeless within 6 months. His brother laughed, his sister laughed, Marilyn laughed hardest. I looked at Mark. He was smiling, then Marilyn leaned toward me. "Oh honey," she said, "he's right. What would you even have without my son?" I picked up my wine. "Want to tell her?" Mark's smile disappeared. "What?" I looked directly at him. "Who owns Bennett Commercial Services?" The room went silent. Mark stared at me, then his mother looked at him. "What is she talking about?" Mark answered too quickly. "Nothing," I smiled. Exactly, but the strange part wasn't Marilyn's reaction. It was the way Mark looked at Frank Delaney, our accountant, because Frank wasn't laughing anymore. He was watching Mark like he'd just caught him in a lie. We drove home in silence. The moment we entered the garage, Mark slammed his door. "What was that?" I took off my coat. "What was what?" "You knew exactly what you were doing." I asked a question. "You embarrassed me." I turned toward him. "You told your mother I'd be homeless without you. It was a joke." "Then why are you angry?" He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "You haven't been involved in the business for years." I stared at him. "I still own half." His face changed, just for a second, but I saw it. "You're still holding on to that. It's not something I have to hold on to." "What does that mean?" "It means it's already mine." Mark walked away, then he stopped at the hallway. "Don't make this ugly, Laura." That sentence stayed with me all night because it sounded less like a husband asking for peace and more like a man warning me not to look too closely. The next morning, Frank called. "Laura, can you come to my office?" "Why?" He paused. "Because I need to show you something." I drove there immediately. Frank closed his office door. Then he put a folder on his desk. "Your ownership agreement." I opened it. There it was. Mark Bennett 50%, Laura Bennett 50%. I looked up. Nothing changed, not legally. "Then why did Mark act like I don't own anything?" Frank sighed. "That isn't what I called you about." He opened another folder. "This is," I saw a property document. "What am I looking at?" "The company is preparing to sell the West Belt Drive warehouse." I frowned. "How much?" "About 800,000. I stared at him. "Why didn't Mark tell me?" Frank didn't answer. Then he slid another page toward me. "Because he has another transaction." My stomach tightened. "What transaction?" Frank looked directly at me. "A lake house." I laughed nervously. "Mark doesn't want a lake house," Frank said quietly. "Apparently he does." I looked at the purchase agreement. 2 names were listed, Mark Bennett, Marilyn Bennett. I read them twice. Then I asked, "Where is my name?" Frank's answer was immediate. "It's not there." That afternoon, I hired Rachel Kim, a business attorney. She was the kind of woman who made you feel calmer simply by refusing to panic. I told her everything. She reviewed the documents. Then she asked, "Has Mark asked you to sign anything recently?" I thought about it. "No." Rachel looked at me. "Are you sure?" "Actually," I stopped. 3 days earlier, Mark had mentioned some routine paperwork. He hadn't brought it home yet. Rachel leaned forward. Don't sign anything until I review it. Why? Because your husband's company is selling an asset. So you're a 50% owner, she paused. And I don't think the lake house is the only thing he's trying to hide. That sentence made my stomach drop. What else could there be? Rachel turned her laptop toward me. There was a company I'd never heard of, MB Strategic Holdings LLC. Payments had been going there for months. I stared at the screen. Who owns it? Rachel looked at me. Your husband. I went home that evening and said nothing. Mark was cooking chicken. He smiled when I walked in. How was your day? Fine. He kissed my cheek. Good. I watched him season the chicken. For 26 years I'd known this man, his laugh, his habits, his moods, the way he scratched his eyebrow when he was lying. And right then he scratched his eyebrow. I almost laughed. He had no idea that I knew, or maybe he knew I knew something. Either way, I wasn't going to tell him, not yet. 2 days later, Mark placed a blue folder on the kitchen counter. Need your signature. For what? Business paperwork. I opened it. Warehouse sale documents. I read them carefully. Then I reached the page Rachel had warned me about, a distribution clause. I looked at Mark. Where is the money going? Into the company. All of it? Yes. I turned another page. What's MB Strategic Holdings? He froze, only for a moment, but it was enough. Why are you asking? Because I saw it. Where? Does it matter? His expression hardened. Laura, Mark, you've been talking to Frank. I didn't answer. He stepped closer. You had no right. I almost laughed. No right to know where our money is going. He slammed his hand against the counter. You haven't worked in that company for 10 years, and you haven't stopped owning my half. Silence. Then he said something that changed everything. You don't understand what I'm trying to do. Then explain it. He looked away. I need to protect the company. From whom? He looked at me. From you. I couldn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid of losing money. I was afraid I'd spent 26 years married to someone who had quietly been preparing for a life that didn't include me. The next morning, Rachel called. We found something. My heart started racing. What? The lake house. What about it? It's not being purchased entirely with Mark's money. I sat down. Whose money? Rachel paused. Part of the deposit appears to be coming from MB Strategic Holdings. I closed my eyes. So he's using company money. We're still verifying it. Can he do that? Not without consequences. Then Rachel said, There's more. What? Your husband has been trying to reduce your ownership. I couldn't speak. Since when? Several months. I looked around my kitchen. The same kitchen where we'd eaten breakfast for years, the same refrigerator covered with Emily's childhood magnets. The same coffee maker Mark complained about replacing, and suddenly none of it felt like mine. Rachel continued. He didn't just want the lake house. What did he want? He wanted the company without you. That night Mark came home late. I was sitting at the kitchen table. He stopped when he saw me. What are you doing? Waiting. For what? The truth, he sighed. Laura, you're making this bigger than it is. No. I pushed a folder toward him. He looked down. His face changed. Where did you get this? Doesn't matter. He opened the folder. Lake house documents, company transfers, ownership records, everything. He sat down. For the first time in weeks, he looked tired. You don't understand. Then help me. He stared at the papers. My mother wanted the lake house, so you use company money. I was going to pay it back. When? I don't know. I nodded slowly. Then I asked the question that mattered. Were you planning to remove me from the company? He didn't answer. That was my answer. A week later, Mark's family held another dinner. This time I almost didn't go. Then I remembered the first dinner. His mother saying I'd be nobody, Mark saying I'd be homeless, and I decided something. I wasn't going there to fight. I was going there to stop hiding. When I walked in, Marilyn smiled. Well, look who's here. I smiled back, still not homeless. Nobody laughed. Mark looked down. We sat at the table. Halfway through dinner, Marilyn started talking about the lake house, our little family retreat. I looked at Mark. He avoided my eyes. Then Marilyn said, Mark deserves something nice after everything he's done for this family. I put my fork down. Actually, Marilyn, I have a question. She looked at me. What? Do you know who owns Bennett Commercial Services? Her smile disappeared. Mark whispered, Laura. I continued. Because according to the documents, I own 50%. Frank wasn't there this time, but I didn't need him. I had the paperwork. Marilyn looked at Mark. Is that true? Mark said nothing. I answered for him, yes. Then I added, and apparently your son has been using company money to buy your lake house. Marilyn's face went pale. What? Mark stood. That's not how it happened. I looked at him. Then tell them how it happened. He couldn't because every explanation required admitting the truth. The divorce wasn't immediate. Neither was the end of the company. There were lawyers, negotiations, valuations, long meetings. Some days I wanted to walk away from everything. Other days I wanted every dollar I was legally entitled to. Rachel kept reminding me, don't make decisions because you're angry, so I didn't. Eventually, Mark bought my 50% interest. The number wasn't what I had imagined. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to start over. The warehouse sold, the lake house deal collapsed, the company survived. And I moved out of the house we'd shared for 18 years. My new place was smaller, much smaller, but the first night I slept there I realized something. No one could tell me what belonged to me. Every drawer, every cabinet, every room, mine. A year later I was working again in commercial insurance. The software was different, the industry had changed, I was rusty, but I was learning. One afternoon my young coworker Josh watched me struggle with a computer system. Need help, I sighed. Yes, he fixed it in 30 seconds, I laughed. I used to run payroll for 38 people. He smiled. Today you're learning passwords. I laughed again, and that was the moment I knew I was okay, not because I had become rich. Not because Mark regretted losing me, not because Marilyn apologized, because I no longer needed any of those things. Months later, Mark asked to meet for coffee. He looked older. I probably did too. He stirred his coffee for a long time, then he said, I was wrong. I waited. I made you smaller because it made me feel bigger. That was the most honest thing he'd ever said. I looked at him. You did, I know, I don't hate you. He looked surprised, but I don't want you back. He nodded. I understand, and for once he did. Sometimes I still think about that first dinner. The bourbon, the laughter, the way Mark looked at me when I asked who owned the company, but I don't think about it with anger anymore. I think about it as the night I finally stopped believing the version of myself everyone else had created. My husband once said I'd be homeless without him. He was wrong. I didn't become wealthy. I didn't become famous. I didn't build another company just to prove a point. I simply built a life where nobody got to tell me what I was worth. And if I learned anything from 26 years of marriage, it was this: the most dangerous person in your life isn't always the one who lies to you. Sometimes it's the person who tells the same lie so many times that you eventually start believing it too. Mark thought I needed him to have a life. He was wrong. I needed something much simpler. I needed the courage to stop letting him define mine, and once I did, I discovered I wasn't starting over. I was finally starting for myself.